Okay, we're right at hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this session. My name is Wei Zhang, and my colleague Amy Spielmaker is joining me today as the co-moderator of this session. Our panel facilitator is Amy Munger from Oregon State University, and she'll be introducing the students panelists in just a minute here. This session is being recorded, so please remain muted unless requested by the presenters. You may choose to turn off your video as you wish. Amy and I will help monitor the chat, so if you have any questions at any point, feel free to use the chat area. Okay, without further ado, I am going to turn the mic over to Amy and the students.
Hey folks, thanks so much for coming. I wanted to share a little bit about our panelists. Our students join us from Oregon State University, University of Oregon, and Montana State University. Their fields of study vary, including computer science, political science, public policy, management, human development, Spanish, mathematics, and engineering. Some originally enrolled in online programs, while others plan to attend their courses in person, but have since enrolled in online or remote learning courses. So before we get started, can we give our panelists a warm welcome and thank them for sharing their time by giving them some Zoom reactions or chat messages of appreciation for being here today. And I'm going to ask panelists to respond to questions for about 30 minutes. And then we'll be opening up the session for audience questions with our remaining time. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll get started. So students, what has gone well in your online or remote courses?
I can answer. I feel like one thing that has gone well is a lot of professors have been really forgiving about late assignments, or, you know, if you message them, they're willing to give you some type of extension. So even though, you know, online schooling is not the best situation for everyone, I think, you know, the teachers and professors have done a really good job of trying to be accommodating when they can.
Kind of to branch off that as well, I really like MSU has adapted a lot of bigger spaces and kind of spaces that you wouldn't normally see as being a classroom into classrooms. So I applaud them for making the effort to try to give me a classroom, even though it's in the volleyball gym. And so with some of those spaces, they're not designed to be a classroom. And so then there's all those added distractions. So while I give them applause for being able to try to like be creative and give me a classroom, it's also a very distracting classroom. And to those of us who have like focus issues, it's very hard to pay attention to a lecture and or something going on in a gym type setting or an auditorium type setting. And so that's been kind of a struggle in the adapted classrooms.
Hey everyone, my name is Nick. I use he or they pronouns, and I am an undergraduate student at the University of Oregon. I would say that overall for me, things have gone pretty well. My grades haven't slipped. I still feel like that I am learning things and retaining information, and I've done pretty well at mitigating and managing Zoom fatigue. I've really enjoyed taking advantage of the flexibility with lectures being recorded and available to watch outside of the live class session. There have been days where I've had to miss the live Zoom session because of other commitments or whatever it may be. And that's more okay now because I can just watch it later. So that's been one thing that's been really nice. But yeah, I would say overall it's going well. I don't think it's exactly I would enjoy being in person, but it is what it is.
I would love to echo Nick there of being able to have that flexibility not to go to class in person. As Macy said, MSU has a lot of classes that are they still offer them in person, but they record all their lectures. And for people who like can't get out of bed in the morning for whatever reason or is having really bad mental health or whatever is going on, it can be very helpful to, not always miss your 9 a.m. class, but instead be able to do it online, right, having rolled out of bed. And then being able to go back and take notes when you're better able to focus, I have found to be very helpful.
Yeah, and I think just echoing what Nick and Maria said is, I think I'm a little bit different in that I originally enrolled in an online program. So I don't have live lectures or anything like that, but it's been really nice to approach things on my own pace and be able to kind of digest these topics on my own pace, and also be able to go back and rewatch the videos over and over again. That's been really easy and really important to me.
Awesome. So sort of the other side of that coin, what has been challenging in your online or remote courses?
I'll go ahead and tackle that one first. So in a lot of my upper division classes, I find that MSU has transitioned to a lot of my classes. They're actually on in person or trying to be a hybrid. But the downfall is if you have to miss class, now your professor or your lecturer is trying to balance how to teach the class in person to those students who are physically in person and also while still recording and seeing things. And those don't always go hand in hand. If you're lecturing on the board, you can't really have the Zoom camera be showing the professor teaching and pointing to the board and showing everything and the lecture slides that are on the computer. So that's been really challenging when I have to miss, is trying to like figure out where those gaps are and what I actually missed that was really important to like conceptually understand the material that was presented that day in class.
Yeah, I can go next. I think, obviously we're not trying to be, there's a lot of things that are hard, but a lot of them you can't fix. So we're understanding that. But some examples are, I feel like classes that were originally in person and are now being done over Zoom are not being adapted well enough to understand the differences. So I know a lot of the classes I've taken, we have a group project, and usually group projects are pretty easy to coordinate. You just stick around after class and talk it out. But when it's over Zoom, it's much harder because you're scheduling other Zoom meetings amongst people. It's just, so I feel like teachers are kind of just keeping the same outline instead of adjusting and maybe, making projects, not group projects, or allowing time after class to work on it together, something like that. And then another thing is, I think that every professor knows that not having a true in-person class, you lose kind of the community feel of the class. And I think that they try to make up for it by having things like discussion boards where there's more interaction. You have to talk back and forth. But that really just adds coursework, and discussion boards aren't really the greatest place to, add knowledge and add worth to the class as a whole. So then it just kind of becomes another stressor instead of doing the job of, adding socialization. There's really no way to do that. So I don't know. Those are two things.
So a big challenge I've had, especially this semester, when Montana State is sort of going back to having in-person classes, is the amount of software and technology that needs to be used, whether it's having Zoom or WebEx or Teams for different classes. Montana State does a Brightspace Desire to Learn as our like home base for classes. However, like 3 of my classes turn in on Gradescope, a couple on Turnitin or Pearson or something. And just like not having a central software or 1, 2, 3, 4 like set things, like really gets to me. Some people on Google Drive, some people on OneDrive. It's pretty unorganized from my point of view. And that's been a challenge for me.
Yeah, that has also been a challenge for me and something that's been frustrating to me. I think another thing that's been probably the most challenging part of remote school is just the disconnect from campus, from my instructors, from my fellow classmates. I really don't feel like I've been able to build relationships at the same level as I was before, which is frustrating because, that is one of the most important parts of being a college student. So, I mean, just an example of this year when I wanted to start reaching out to instructors for letters of recommendation for scholarships, I really didn't feel like I had anyone this year that I had built a connection with strong enough to reach out in that capacity. So it's frustrating because I've always wanted to be a UO student, and it does feel a bit like this part of my life is actively being stolen from me, which is just incredibly frustrating. So I mean, I miss walking on campus and running into friends, meeting people, going to student events, going to parties, all the really fun and rewarding things that go along with being a college student. And just remote school can't really, offer that authentically. We've tried our best, but I think that's been the most challenging, is the disconnect to campus and instructors.
So I have a couple things that have been challenging. I definitely would also say the kind of social part. I'm the leader of 2 different clubs, as well as we tried to start a wellness committee specifically for computer science students. And people have so many emails, so many different software, so many things coming at them that it's really hard to promote the oh, we're trying to do a hike this weekend, so we're outside, everyone's going to wear masks, you come if you're comfortable. People are asking for these things, and then attendance is still insanely low because either people have been looking at their email all day and they missed the one that says here's the social event. So that's been a challenge kind of socially, is even when people are asking for social events, it's so hard to get people involved. And then kind of on a similar note of that fatigue and wearing out throughout the semester. Again, I'm a computer science major, so before we went online, I was staring at my computer all day anyway. Now though, it's literally, I wake up, I look at my computer, and then it's 2 a.m. and I'm still looking at my computer, and I forgot to go outside today. And that's really been a struggle for me. And I know that I make an effort to leave my room, but I know a lot of my classmates don't necessarily. And so that has been just a general challenge of always looking at the computer. And the last one I wanted to mention was access to technology. I know wonderful that most campuses have Wi-Fi online, but I have friends in rural parts of Montana who had to go home to take care of their family and literally can't get onto their Zoom meetings. And so it's once a week they'll go to the public library, check all their homework, turn stuff in, and they definitely have accommodations, but that is something, even though it's not a challenge for me personally, it really worries me for a lot of my friends. So I wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
I already said something, but I thought of something else. Basically, I think that Zoom makes it easy to disconnect from what's kind of going on. And I remember before Zoom classes, if there was kind of a big event happening in the news, we would take a break and all kind of be looking at our phones in class and talk about it and be like, maybe right now it's not the time to be learning about whatever we're learning about. And then in Zoom, like I remember watching our Capitol be like invaded and just class continued. Like I was literally in class and my teacher like mentioned it and then just kept teaching, which is very strange. So I feel like it's kind of important to, like that's emotionally taxing to just not like recognize whatever is happening and just kind of continuing on like normal. So I also think that's another weird, strange thing that Zoom classes have made. And I think it'd be good to pay attention. And if something crazy is happening, like take the same time to pause, talk about it, recognize it as you would in like a normal classroom, because it's just as stressful, you know.
I'm making lots of notes, so thank you. Lots of good thoughts so far. I wonder if there are things that have stood out to you that your instructors have done that has helped to make learning easier, like specific actions you think of that folks in instructing roles have been able to do to make the process of acquiring new knowledge easier for you.
So I've had this in one class a semester since we've gone online, but within Desire to Learn D2L, I've had teachers make little checklists that have due dates that show up red when it gets within 24 hours of them. You can check off when you complete an assignment, watch a video, reading, and save it, and it shows that you checked it off. And other than having a physical planner, that's been really helpful because I mentioned like the different softwares can screw with people's heads, get them all confused. But the checklists that I've had at least one teacher implement have been super useful in helping with due dates. And then also calendars on like Google that are consistently updated and show when exams and homework are due have been super nice for me. And a teacher recommended that we print them out and put them on our walls by our desks, which I have done. And while I'm online learning, it's been super easy. Just look to the side. Hey, exam next week, lab tomorrow. So, yeah.
I would really love to add on to what Peyton said. I love when people put calendars, when teachers put calendars on. I also really appreciate when they'll do it at the beginning of the week. They give a rundown of what we're doing. And like, I have some classes that are in person one day of the week and then not for the other few. And just saying like, oh, this is our in-person day for last names A to G, and then something is due on Tuesday, something is due on Friday. I think that is insanely helpful.
Yeah, and I'd say that my two things that have been helpful are being available for your students. So whether that be through office hours or email, but I found that Zoom office hours has been insanely helpful because I might not be reading something the quite correct way, and having maybe a TA or a professor be able to explain it to me over Zoom has been really useful. The other thing is, say if availability is not super open, is just to make sure that your expectations in your assignments are clearly defined. I've had both good and bad on that, and it's really unfortunate to have to spend hours just to kind of clearly define the expectations of an assignment.
Yeah, and I mentioned this at the beginning, but really the best thing that has been done for me is being more considerate about late work and having less of a penalty. Especially, you know, if someone reaches out and says, hey, I'm struggling, what's the point of making them have fewer points? They're already struggling. Like, the point is to learn, not to, you know, do XYZ by this day. And then another thing that is really valuable to me is I like when teachers talk about, like, if there's a big paper, a big midterm or something, talk about it the next day, like talk about how it went in class, because it's something that was a big deal for us and we spent a lot of time on. And then when you show up to class and like you just start learning, it feels like there's no, not reward, but it feels very disconnected sometimes. Like what's happening on our time and what's happening in class feels like two different spheres of the class. And for me personally, I really like when it's like, oh, this was a question a lot of people missed. Let's talk about it. Or even just like acknowledging if it went well, if it didn't go well, to like just connect the outside of class and inside of class a bit more.
Yeah, I would agree with what everyone has said so far. I think the two things that have been the most helpful is one, like a really organized Canvas page and syllabus that like has really clear deadlines, like the other panelists were talking about, and really clear like expectations for assignments. Like I just think like it's really important to like be communicating even more right now and over communicating even. And then the second thing that has been really helped my like learning is just more active learning within class. So for example, like I had an instructor this last term who it was rare that she would just lecture at us. Instead it was almost like constantly like group work and breakout rooms and large group discussions where everyone has to engage. And I just felt like at the end of the term, like I felt like I really knew her as a person. She really knew me. I knew my fellow students, and then most importantly, I really had a stronger understanding of the course material itself. So, yeah.
I just want to say it hasn't necessarily been the professors. Like the professors are making, you know, really trying to make an effort here and making themselves more available to meet on Zoom. But for me personally, it's really helpful when there's that one professor that says, hey, let's go meet in my office. Make sure you bring your mask. And then I get to go sit down with them because I'm an engineering student. So I'm looking at mechanics of materials homework right now, and I'm trying to learn it hybrid, like online in person, but then there's not really an opportunity for me to go ask the professor, hey, what did I do wrong on this assignment? Because here, let me hold my piece of paper up to my camera on my computer. Can you tell me where I went wrong in the math? Because I've made it 45 minutes of the way through this problem and I'm not going to start over just because I can't take this integral right. If that kind of makes sense. So it has really helped me. Like I've reached out, one of my professors said, hey, reach out to Smarty Cats. They have a few tutors that are tutoring in person. And so I did, and they do have a couple, and that has really helped to be able to like work through my own work and see where I screwed up as compared to just like talking through it, because it's a little bit different when you can look at your work and say, okay, look, this is kind of where you went wrong, as compared to trying to like verbalize math over the camera per se. So, I mean, everyone's making an effort, and I do understand that it's a very trying time, but I miss being able to just like walk into an office hour in person and say, hey, I'm confused on this last bit of this problem. Can you help? Where now it's like a 45-minute process over Zoom or making an appointment and waiting until the next day to go see the appointment type stuff.
Okay, thanks. Are there things that like some barriers that you've encountered or things that have made learning a little bit more difficult that expand on things? I know y'all have shared a lot, but wonder if there's specific barriers that you feel like you've encountered in the last couple of terms.
I'm just going to keep it really short on this one, but I think one barrier that comes up a lot is instructors not knowing how to use Zoom. I think we've all like been in the meetings where they're like, can you see my screen now? Okay, can you see it now? So just like going through like just dealing with that has been a lot, but instructors are getting a lot better. And then I think the other thing that I would also mention is just Wi-Fi, having reliable Wi-Fi can be a barrier for a lot of people, instructors themselves too. So definitely something institutions should be thinking about.
Yeah, I wanted to mention quick, I literally do not know a single college student who has not had bad mental health in this past year. And that makes going to school, doing assignments, everything so much harder. And especially when your class is over Zoom, it doesn't feel as like real, which makes it even harder to motivate yourself to do it, because it feels very like this all exists online. There's no even concrete aspect to it. So I think it's really important to keep in mind that honestly, probably the majority of your students like don't have the best mental health. So they have different priorities maybe and abilities.
I think one of the biggest barriers right now for MSU is they did away with spring break. I don't know about the rest of you, but my motivation level was okay, just got to go till I get this Monday off. All right, I'll go till I get the next Monday off. Oh, 2 more weeks and I'm at spring break. And then you come back and you're like, there's 4 more weeks to this semester. And that's kind of how you help keep yourself motivated. Well, now I've been going strong because I'm a full-time student. I have a part-time job and I'm trying to do these other things like hang out with my friends and, maintain a little bit of a social life, like study with them type stuff. But I'm like, okay, I've been pushing for like 14 weeks now. This is insane. And I still have 4 to go. Fantastic.
Okay. What do you wish instructors knew about students? And that might be things that you've heard from friends. It might be things that you've experienced, but, are there gaps in what you think your instructors know about students, and what would they be? What would you want us to know about you?
I think for me, I personally have a lot of professional relationships with my teachers, and like I talk to them as well as students a lot. And I think it's just important to remember that like on the student side, we know that the teachers are also having a hard time and they're doing their best. And on the student side, the students are having a hard time and doing their best. For people who aren't used to online learning, it's tough. And I think that sometimes it can be easy to forget that everyone is having a hard time, or at the same time be like, well, everyone's having a hard time. Why is it any harder for one person than another? And especially freshmen, I know, have literally not been able to make friends because they're stuck in their dorm room and like can't do that. And so this semester, especially these past couple of semesters, have felt very much like school is the only thing I'm doing, and I'm just waiting till we're vaccinated and back in person. And I think that sometimes it's important just to remember that in general, that we all know everyone's having a tough time, and I don't know, that's something that I kind of wish was more, I don't know. Yeah, sorry.
This is a little different, but I think I talked to my thesis mentor about this, and she told me she didn't think any of the teachers knew this, which was surprising. But at least for me, almost all of my assignments are due midnight on Sunday, like all of them. And if you do some subtle math, that means that Sunday is like school day, and it really shortens the entire, like our entire week. Monday through Friday is classes, Saturday is your fun day, and then Sunday you have 6 assignments due at midnight. So for me, I wish that like teachers were more aware that giving homework due on Sunday isn't actually like a nice thing to do because you're like letting them have all this time. It's the same day every other assignment they have is due, and maybe like 2 essays, 2 quizzes, like. So I would maybe recommend switching that to have it be due the day you have classes, because then it's at least won't be the same day for every single class that you're enrolled in, or at least be aware that people have a lot of things happening on Sunday. And then this is, I forgot to mention this earlier, so not for this question, but giving feedback on assignments is also really good because it helps you feel more connected. It makes you feel like the teacher is actually reading your assignment, because sometimes you literally don't know, because like you just hit submit and then you get a 10 and then you look and you see that the average for the assignment is a 10 out of 10. You're like, oh, so they just like gave everyone 10s. And so it's really helpful to have like some type of unique message tied to the grade, some unique feedback. It feels, like the teacher actually sees you uniquely in some way.
And I think in general, communicating and learning online is a practice and a test in empathy overall. Communication can come off extremely cold or disconnected. And then the other thing I would consider is that you have students of varying backgrounds. Some of us are non-traditional, maybe a little older. I live in Hawaii. I am hours behind you guys right now. Some of us have already started families. So there's so many factors to consider and to think about in how you're running a class.
Okay. I have one more question and then we'll open it up, I think, for folks in the audience. I'm curious, if your friend was considering taking an online course or remote course in the future, what would you tell them?
Well, I think that really depends on how they are as a person. I think that in-person classes are miles ahead of online learning, partly because we've been doing online class since forever, or I mean in-person class forever, and just online class the last 13, 14 months. Um, but to me, online class is really personally, like, you have to be personally motivated. You have to be driven to get things done. And for some kids who don't have that personal motivation, um, the desire to go learn and want to get stuff done, I don't think online learning is there. I think there's too much flexibility for some, but for those that like flexibility, going off what Nick said to one of the first questions about being able to watch the videos whenever, you don't have to wake up at 8, you can set your own schedule. I think that is the biggest upside to online school, and that could not only keep more people in school, but bring more people to school.
Yeah, I would say something very similar. I'd be like, I think in online classes, there's a lot of times when you can take shortcuts. Like, not to be this person, if all of your answers to every quiz you post is on a Quizlet on the internet, every student in your class knows that, and the vast majority of people are going to look at that, even if it's not looking at it during the quiz. If you look at it just prior, it's right there. So you really have to have this structure to be like, okay, I need to learn this knowledge so it's actually in my head, instead of, get good grades, but not actually learn everything. So it takes a lot more, I don't know, like personal motivation to be like, okay, no, I have to do these readings. I have to do these lectures. I have to make sure I learn everything, even though I'm kind of in an environment where it's easier not to learn that and to still be rewarded by doing less work. So that's something that, especially if I was just starting out in college, thankfully this is my last year, that could really put you in a bad place if you're taking those shortcuts forever and not really learning the knowledge fully.
If I could piggyback off what Julianne said real fast, I do think it will be a shock to teachers and students alike what testing is like when we get back to full in-person classes. Personally, I love the open note and being able to access what I can during tests that allow. However, I think a very wide population of online students use that very beneficially, and when they're back in the classroom, I think is test scores are going to be a lot lower due to lack of information in their own brains, like what Julianne was saying.
And just on that point, like, I think that, you know, remote learning and COVID has, it's sucked for the most part, but there are a lot of instances where it has allowed us to question if something we've been doing all along is actually the way we should be doing it. Like, so just like on that point about testing, you know, it's like, is this really the way we, like, that we should have all along been, like, is this how we're testing people's knowledge? Or like, is this how we're seeing how they're retaining information? And like, is that right? Or so like, I've really enjoyed the take home test. I felt like there's a lot less pressure and that I actually am retaining information more because I'm able to do it in an environment that is less stressful and where I have more time to go through materials and whatnot. So just on that quick point. But yeah, if my friend asked me about taking remote classes, I would probably say a lot of what the other panelists have said. I would say, make sure it's right for you. You know, it's really, it may work for some people, but it doesn't work for a lot of people. So just like keep that in mind. Like, my other recommendations would be like, don't take an asynchronous class. I took an asynchronous remote class in fall, and I don't know if I just didn't have the like self-discipline to hold myself accountable, but I just got behind and could not keep up with it. I really enjoy the synchronous ones where you actually go to a live Zoom. I would say keep your camera on. It makes it more engaging. It gives your instructor someone to talk to. It holds yourself accountable to actually paying attention. I would say reach out to the resources that are available to you, whether it's in the counseling center for your mental health, whether it's in the academic advising center for your path, whether it's to the financial resources on campus to help get either technological devices or Wi-Fi or anything like that. There are a lot of resources have come to the surface in the last year that didn't exist previously. So yeah, make sure it's right for you. Those are my little tips, and reach out to the resources that are there.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. I thank you again, Weiwei and Amy. If you haven't already and you have a question that you'd like to ask the group, if you want to throw that in the chat message, that they'll get our questions kind of lined up. So which should be our first audience question? Amy, Weiwei?
There's one in the chat. Amy, can you see the chat? Okay. Would you like to read that to the students?
Sure, yeah. I'm curious about what campus and community resources, if any, the panel would like to see emphasized more or built into their classes. And some examples were tutoring, computer lab, counseling, and psychological services, library, student groups and events, community resources like housing, transportation, childcare, etc.
One thing that my kind of group talks a lot about, sorry, going back, I'm a coordinator for the wellness committee for computer science. And one thing we talk a lot about is how do we push the resources out. And I think that when those things, like at the beginning of the year, everyone's super overloaded with information. And so just by mentioning things like that or having it on your D2L page, whatever your thing is very helpful to remind students that they're there. I think you, in your example, gave a lot of good ones. Definitely psychological counseling services. Absolutely, if your school has success advisors, I know that I go to my success advisor every week and it's insanely helpful to stay on track. Student clubs and kind of getting that social aspect is very important in this time, and definitely any if you have one of my teachers integrated into her class at the end of class, everyone says one thing that they're good at, one thing that they're excited for, kind of to try and like boost morale and just general, like, you have good things about yourself. And I think doing little wellness things like that, or reminding people to take a break, go outside, would be awesome to integrate into class.
Yeah, to also answer that, I guess my answer is more about just like resources in general, not ones that could be necessarily incorporated into the classroom, but two like really big things that happened when the move to remote learning happened that have been really helpful to me is one, I don't know, like I think when this when we moved online, there was something happening with the textbook publishers where they were allowing more inclusive access to their textbooks or something along those lines. And some like textbooks during the pandemic have suddenly become a lot cheaper, or there is no cost at all. And maybe that's just my experience. But a lot of instructors have moved towards using online books that are through the library, or using OER, open educational resources. And that has been a really positive development and something that's really helped me as a student. And then another thing is there has been with the pandemic and like the economic crisis that has coupled with it, there's been a lot of more priority on campuses to address more like basic needs services. So like for example, like at the UO, like they had like an emergency fund that came up for students, that was helping students with rent, that was helping students with food security, with so many different things. And I actually was able to access that fund to get a new computer, which like before the pandemic, I had this laptop that I bought. I'm a low income first gen non-traditional student, so like I'm not very rich. And like my laptop, like it wouldn't work unless it was plugged into the wall. It would just die like in the middle of class. So like without that emergency fund, like I wouldn't have been able to get a new computer, and I wouldn't have been able to be as successful in online classes. So I'll say like those resources that like have really helped lessen that affordability burden on me has really helped me a lot as a student during remote world.
What do you think? Do we have time for one more question? Or are we getting close?
Yeah, we've got time. Yeah.
Okay. So I think this was in response about the community building aspects of the course. One person asked, I'm wondering how we can help build community in our classes without defaulting to things like discussion boards. Is this even something faculty should be trying to achieve?
I love that question, by the way, and I think yes, absolutely. Um, One of the things, I'm in an in-person class only on Wednesdays, and it's a statistics class. There's 5 tables, each have 3 to 4 people, and I only know the people sitting at my table 14 weeks in. One of the things I think that could be used to help build community, especially over Zoom, is the breakout rooms. They're really, really awkward the first 1, 2, or 3 streams. But I think that's something that you just keep doing, keep hammering those breakout rooms to the point of eventually people are going to start talking, and that's just how it needs to be. Just like with icebreakers in a classroom, or even just how this started when, people were slow to talk. The comfortability is low, and that just grows with participation and use of the software and stuff. And I think that if my teachers would have kept hammering in the breakout rooms and getting us to meet other people, my classes would be a lot different than they are right now, where I know maybe 1, 2 people.
Yeah, I agree that the breakout rooms are really helpful, especially if you kind of use them regularly and then you come back to class and there's kind of like an open discussion portion where you talk about, oh, how'd it go? What answers did you get? And it almost makes the whole class environment feel more person to person than like teacher to students. So I would recommend that. This is also this program called Flipgrid. I feel like it's good for very specific purposes, but it's like a discussion board, but with videos. So you would say, like, I use it for my internship class. And so I say how my class has been going, how my internship is. And then the response is the short videos, and it feels much more personal because people like, oh, hi, Julianne. It was great hearing about this. I'm wondering this. And like, it's actually tied to a person. I think, like I said, that's very specific, but I'll type the name of that in the chat. And I think it's maybe worth looking into because, if you do it every week, you start replying to the same people and kind of, for me, it built connection.
For me, it's not necessarily like a huge thing, but it's more of like getting on a personal level with the instructor. Just last week, one of my instructors for my 400 level engineering class made some funny comments about he can't move the dates of the finals and how he wasn't impressed with that. And it made us all laugh, but it made us realize that he's also human. Like, he's trying just as hard as we are. If that kind of makes sense, to connect with your students, to say, hey, look, I'm human too. This is kind of the way the university goes, and joke with them about how, yeah, this sucks. Let's just get through it together and kind of create that sense that you're all human and work towards the common goal together.
I just wanted to offer the flip side to this a little bit. So being that I'm in a program specifically that was online, there are students all over the world enrolled in this program. So consider that maybe these Zoom breakout things are a logistical nightmare for us. So in certain cases, discussion boards are going to be necessary. They're not great, but it just takes a little bit of time to think about what exactly, again, clear expectations of what are we supposed to be discussing, what's the research we can put into this, and how you are expecting us to respond is really helpful when they're kind of unavoidable for us.
Also, if I could add one thing, I've sort of been looking at all the questions asked, and I saw Tim ask a question about online tools we wish all instructors would incorporate. I just have to say checklists like week by week checklists or planning out the week is one of the most important and helpful things I've had this semester.
Maria, did I see you unmute before? I wanna
Yes,
make sure you
sorry.
had a chance. No,
Um,
don't be. I just want to make sure you had a chance to share.
I appreciate that. One of the things I want to point out with the community building in classes is for like myself, who's a big introvert, I have never made friends with people in classes. All my friends come from extracurriculars. And as someone said that, you know, students don't like breakout rooms, I am definitely one of those students. And the classes where I have felt that I've connected to more people didn't necessarily use breakout rooms as much as they would have like a project that you could work on in a group if you wanted to, and they would set those groups. And so you're kind of forced to go, well, not forced, but you were able to go say hello to like these other students and work on a project with them if they wanted. And I found that kind of having that option to go work with other students when you're all around the world and can't meet up like timing wise, absolutely you don't have to do the group project, but then being able to make those connections if you want is very helpful for me. I don't like having to make small talk. If that, yeah.
Okay, so I know we're a little bit over. Can we give another big thank you to the panelists? Round of applause. I have lots of notes. I'm sure other folks do as well. There is a session evaluation, so I'm going to turn it back over to Amy/Weiwei, and y'all can do the wrapping up piece.
Yes, I just put the link to the session eval in the chat, and it's also linked from the schedule. But yes, thank you all for joining us. It's so rare that we get to just have a panel of students. We can just ask them all sorts of questions that we want. So that's fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.